It is Thursday. I am here with ChaCha and Anna Navarro. Hello, Anna.
Hello, Brian.
You and I were just discussing. We had a great show. I thought it was a lot of fun. We talked about important things. We talked about silly things. We had a great guest, Mariska Hargitay. And then somewhere in the middle of the show, Sarah Haynes devolved into a blubbering mess of emotion.
I kind of feel happens with some frequency, no?
You and I were saying, like, we're pretty much dead inside, but Sarah wears her heart literally on her sleeve.
Yeah, sometimes I think she's the menopausal one, not me.
Today she didn't have sleeves, but if she was wearing sleeves, her heart would have been on them. When that happens, do you ever think like, oh, I wish I felt things?
No, when that happens, since I'm sitting next to her, I usually think, my God, should I pull out a Kleenex? Should I help her put her eyelash back on? What am I going to do?
It's incredibly sincere. It's not performative in any way. And it's a very useful to have someone on the show.
Pedro Almodovar did a show. No, Pedro Almodovar did a very famous film. It won a bunch of awards, which I think could be based on Sarah. Mm-hmm. Woman on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Do you remember that one? Mujeres
Yes.
al borde de un ataque de nervio. But I remember one time 100 years ago, and it's one of those memories that comes back to me about my brother all the time. My brother who passed away, Tuto. We were in Breckenridge, Colorado, skiing. I was a little kid, and Terms of Endearment had come out. We went to see Terms of Endearment in the theater, and my brother Tuto was in the middle. On one side was his girlfriend, on the other side was me, and she was bawling. I was bawling. So there was a point in my life when I did have feelings, and I remember my brother would go like this and like this, like he couldn't believe these two women in absolute tears, and then my brother doing that then made me laugh hysterically in the middle of Deborah Winger's character dying in the movie, which was incredibly inappropriate. So yeah, it was. But in Spanish, there's a nickname. Mm-hmm. There's this the monster you scare your children with.
Yes.
It's called La Llorona, which means the crying woman.
Oh.
So that might be my new nickname for Sarah, La Llorona.
La Llorona. I like. Am I saying it right?
La Llorona.
La Llorona.
We can work on it.
Well, so the funny thing for me is, I mean, the great thing about Sarah is she kind of like balances out the rest. She's so over the top that it makes the rest of you almost normal when you all add you together and do some division. But yesterday she was on this podcast because I wasn't here at my daughter's graduation. And she interviewed Dr. Sutton, who's a great guest, and it was a fantastic interview. But she cried then too, yesterday. So it's like,
has Joy ever cried on the show?
Has Joy ever cried in her life? I don't know, honestly. And the last time I remember crying, besides like, I mean, honestly, I think I did when I saw the movie. Cover your ears, ChaCha. When I saw the movie Marley and Me.
Oh, shut up! You cannot talk about this movie in front of ChaCha.
I mean, I could not get out of the theater at the end, and I was weeping like a 5-year-old. It was horrible. That just destroyed me. But other than that, yeah, that's pretty much it.
I guess I've had to cry so many times in my life, right?
Yeah.
My brother died. My mother died.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that I've had to cry about in my life that.
Yeah, I've cried about real stuff, I guess,
yeah.
but yeah.
I mean,
anyway.
not that this is not real stuff, but.
No, for sure. Marley and Me, I was saying, it was.
I also, a lot of the stuff that's going on in America.
No, you
right
get
now
emotional about that for sure.
I think right now most of my emotions are focused on outrage, anger, indignation. I'm
that's
just
actually
so
a lot of
pissed off about what's happening.
A lot of it, I think, is which emotion do you default go to? I think there are people that go to sadness, and there are people who go to anger when they're confronted with something. Not that anyone would watch a movie like that and be angry, but I feel like you channel into. I think you find anger more productive than sadness. Is that accurate?
Well. Yes. And I also, and this is incorrect, and I probably shouldn't think about that, but think about all the times that you have seen people crying or breaking down about the things that are going on in America right now. Mm-hmm. And it only feeds the trolls talking about, oh, look, we've broken so-and-so.
Oh,
we've
like those
broken
memes
Selena
after,
Gomez,
yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so, no, there's not going to be a meme about me that way. I mean, I will cry of joy when Donald Trump stops being president. I assure you, the tears of joy will be absolutely real. But yeah, I think wrongly so. Getting emotional, crying
is
by
weaponized
some
by people.
is weaponized, and
yeah. Well, I will say Sarah is absolutely just sincere about her feelings, and I respect that. I do.
Also, with as much makeup as we have on for that show, my God, crying could end up being a very ugly scene.
She pulls it off. All right, let's talk about some of the hot topics because we've had headlines all week about President Trump's strike on Iran. We've discussed how many presidents, both Republican and Democrat, have thought about doing this over the years, but never taken action. I know you have concerns about what happened. What's your biggest concern?
My biggest concern is that it's Donald Trump doing it. And I just, I think he's so unstable and mercurial and egotistical. You never know why he's doing something. I'm also concerned by the fact that he is surrounded by some nincompoops as he is throwing us into this, very real conflict in the Middle East against Iran. It makes me very uncomfortable to know that we're in a situation where we are at war, where we have, bombed a foreign country, and the Secretary of Defense is Pete Hegseth, who I feel lacks the moral compass, character, and experience to be a Secretary of Defense. He's got Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Intelligence. Just 10 days ago, he was telling us that the things she had said under oath to Congress about Iran were wrong. He's got a 22-year-old former intern who was bagging groceries at a supermarket in Texas, leading the division of counterterrorism, of terrorist threats at the Department of Homeland Security. And one of the things I'm concerned about is what is Iran going to do? Because I think this idea that this is one and done, like Trump wants us to believe, is magical thinking. It is, surrealism. This is not Grenada under Reagan, where, this is not some little island. This is not Panama when we went in and the Marines went in and grabbed Noriega. This is a country of almost 100 million people with real capabilities, and it's not just military capabilities. It's sleeper cells. It's all of these things, and I feel very disturbed and just I don't have confidence in Donald Trump. I don't.
Yeah, I mean the notion that intelligence or information that potentially embarrasses the administration is dismissed as wrong for that reason is concerning. I will say, and Joy started the show today saying like she hopes it was successful. And there is something to that. I mean, the devil's advocate version of this is if President Obama had gotten a ceasefire and taken out the capability of Iran to have a nuclear weapon, we'd probably be talking about it in a positive way.
But listen, here's and this is to me an error of Donald Trump's own doing. Because was the bombing successful? Yes. Did it affect the nuclear capabilities of Iran? We may not know for how long. We might not know how much. But yes, is it helping bring them to the table for negotiation? It certainly seems so, and I sincerely hope so.
Right.
The problem is that what could have been defined as success does not look successful when what Donald Trump is doing is going on TV and repeatedly using the word obliterate.
Right. And attacking the media and yeah.
And their capabilities do not seem to have been obliterated. And then you've got, I was just telling you, he's got this choir of trained SEALs that clap and repeat literally the words he says. They're all out on TV repeating the word obliterate, because if Donald Trump says obliterate, they all go out there and say obliterate it. So it's the mixed messages, right? Donald Trump, all his minions go out on TV and say this is not about regime change. And then he gets on Twitter and he says, wouldn't it be great to change the regime? You've got his Director of National Intelligence testifying that Iran was not having these capabilities. And then he says she is wrong. You have got, intelligence reports that say that the nuclear capabilities have not been obliterated. They have been damaged, severely damaged. And he goes out and wants to convince us otherwise. And in order to do so and distract from that, he makes it seem like the media is questioning the patriotism and talent of the pilots, which is
crazy.
Ridiculous, and that the media is the bad guy here. Look, you and I remember when we were told by much more capable people, by the way, and much more experienced people who were around George W. Bush at the time, people like Condoleezza Rice, people like Colin Powell, we were told that there were weapons of mass destruction, and there weren't. We were told that the mission had been accomplished, and it hadn't. And so, I think the American people who are footing the bill for this very expensive operation have a right to transparency. And I certainly think our representatives, the representatives of the American people in Congress, which is a co-equal branch of government, have a right to transparency from this administration.
Definitely. The briefings and things like that.
That he's saying he's going to keep information from Congress. They fund this. They're the ones that approve the funding. So I think it's and also, part of the reason that people voted for Donald Trump is because he said over and over and over again that he wouldn't get us into foreign wars, that he, would avoid World War III. He was constantly accusing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris that they were going to get us into World War III. In fact, if anybody was right with the predictions, it was Kamala Harris, who predicted that if Donald Trump got elected, we'd be at war in 6 months. Guess what? She was right. So all the things that he said, and that's why you see that even people who supported him, even his MAGA base, some of them are very upset about this action.
Now, one thing you've been vocal about that I think is very true is that Americans shouldn't allow all the news about Iran to distract them from the other things that are happening in the nation. And on our show, sometimes we get distracted by things and don't get to talk about it. We didn't get to talk about the incident with Senator Padilla really in detail, or a lot of the deportation news that came out. What's on your mind there?
Well, yeah, look, Americans we all have a very limited attention span. And the truth is that Donald Trump is so good at throwing so many balls and shiny objects in the air at one time that it's hard to keep your focus.
Right.
And like, to me, it seems incredible, but it was, less than 2 weeks ago that two state legislators, the state legislators in Minnesota were threatened, some of them murdered, and their dog in their house.
It's amazing how things keep happening so fast.
And we haven't spoken about that. That disappeared completely from, what we were, from it being discussed. I think we need to keep an eye and be laser focused on the human rights violations and the racial profiling and racism that is being perpetrated against, in particular, the Latino community right now. The stories that are coming out, it is Dante's Inferno what the Latino community is living through. In Florida, they are now building a detention center in the Everglades. They're calling it Alligator Alcatraz to hold people. The Supreme Court has now approved sending some of these immigrants to places like Sudan, people who are from places like Cuba. And, and the stories are heartbreaking. That does break my heart. When I see a Mexican landscaper with his weed whacker, who is the father of 3 U.S. Marines, 1 a veteran, 2 currently serving in the Marines, and he is hauled down into the pavement by 6 masked men without identification, and his head is repeatedly slammed against the pavement. How does that not outrage America? When you see the U.S. citizens who have been wrongly detained because they have my skin color and maybe they speak with my same accent, how does that not outrage America? When you see legal permanent residents and U.S. citizens and you see people torn from their children, their little children, it's incredible that this party, the Republican Party and the MAGA base that talks so damn much about children and the rights of children and the rights of the unborn? How about the rights of these little children, these U.S. citizen children born in this country who are now abandoned and have no parents to go home to because of what they are doing? And let us remember, everybody is in favor, including me, of taking hardened criminals and gang members out of this country.
I think it's important that you keep saying that because there's a picture that gets painted.
Right.
The idea that, open borders, let everybody in, and keep them here forever, no matter what they've done or anything like that. And everyone at our table, who I think a lot of the country considers left-leaning, all think that criminals should be deported.
Look,
after due process, of course.
Yeah, but here's what America needs to know. Here's the absolute truth. The vast majority of the people that are being detained and deported do not have any criminal record and are not members of gangs. So they are pulling a fast one on America. Mm-hmm. They keep wanting to convince America that it is not good, decent, hardworking people who are doing jobs that nobody else in this economy wants to do, who are an integral part of our society and our economy, without whose jobs and work we cannot exist as a country. Those are the people who have built families, who have opened business here, the people who have U.S. Marine and veteran children, people who are the spouses of military members. Those are the people who are being sent away for some of the stupidest things. I told you the story the other day of someone who I heard about, who I know, I know the person who told me this story. This is a Cuban woman, legal permanent resident, who was detained 20 years ago and had weed, got caught with weed, which isn't even illegal anymore. But she has that. That lady's got a deportation order to Sudan because there are countries like Cuba that are not taking some of these people back. Mm-hmm. And by the way, Trumpers, they supported Donald Trump. I have seen video after video of Latinos who supported Donald Trump, whose fathers are now being detained and have deportation orders, whose husbands are now being detained and have deportation orders. All those Latinos in Miami who kept singing about voting for Donald Trump and kept, and had those big Trump flags. Well, turns out that a lot of their friends and colleagues and relatives and people that matter in their lives are now being deported. And the other thing is, not all these people are undocumented, or what I call undocumented. Because if you have temporary protective status, you've got some status and you have a work permit. If you came in with a parole, you've got status and you've got a work permit. If you've got a pending asylum claim, you've got status and you've got work permit. And let's remember, Brian, this drives me nuts. Yeah. Let's remember that at the same time, they are targeting brown Latinos in the farms and in the Home Depots. How ironic. They say that these immigrants are freeloaders, but the only place that they go and round them up are places of work, very damn hard work. But at the same time that that's happening, where my people are being plucked off the streets and beaten and disappeared and kidnapped by masked men and disappeared into vans and their relatives don't even know where they are, at that same time, Donald Trump opened the doors to white Afrikaners fleeing a non-existent genocide in South Africa. That is not happening. But they were white and my people are brown. And you know what? One of those white Afrikaners that we brought into this country, right now, he is being held in this country because he strangled his spouse. How's that? And we haven't heard of that in the media. Go look it up, America. So yes, so at the same time that you are telling me that Latinos without a criminal record, without gang affiliation, are terrible animals, invaders that need to be thrown out of this country, at the same time that you're telling me that Latinos fleeing the dictatorial regimes of Venezuela and Nicaragua and Cuba, then at the same time you're doing that, that you're telling me those people need to be thrown out, you're opening the door to white Afrikaners. Tell me, what's the big difference between white Afrikaners fleeing a made-up genocide and brown Latinos fleeing actual dictatorship? It is racism. This is a racist administration run by racists. Yesterday, Stephen Miller put out a tweet in response to the mayoral primary election in New York, where and he basically said, Mandami is the reason why we need to control immigration. Well, may I remind Stephen Miller that every single person who lives in this country, every single American, is either a Native American, an immigrant, or a slave? And may I remind Stephen Miller that the First Lady of the United States is an immigrant who came here on an Einstein visa? I mean, an EB-1. So yeah, this is, and I want to call it for what it is. Yeah. And let's just talk about the racism of this administration. What happened between J.D. Vance and Alex Padilla, where he called Senator Alex Padilla, who he served with in Congress. Let's remember that J.D. Vance, as the vice president, is the current president of the U.S. Senate, yes, where Alex Padilla is a member. And J.D. Vance called him, supposedly as a mistake, oh, where is Jose Padilla? A guy, Jose Padilla. Who's Jose Padilla? Jose Padilla was a guy who actually committed a very serious crime of domestic terrorism in this country. Mm-hmm. Because he wants to, call everybody who's a Latino, a Maria, or a Jose, dismiss them that way. In the same way that they pretended not to be able to pronounce Kamala Harris's name. But shame on J.D. Vance in particular, because he's got children that are half Indian. Because he's got a wife whose name is Usha, and who I respect enough as vice president and as the wife of the vice president to know her name and learn how to pronounce it and do it correctly. So just really the hypocrisy, the lack of respect, and the public racism without any attempt to try to even hide it.
All right. Well, I think righteous anger is your go-to.
Yeah, that's my
And
thing.
I think that's it. Yeah. No tears, but righteous anger. Let's end with something adorable. You're going on a trip today.
Yep.
After tomorrow's show. And I heard that ChaCha has entered a new fashion phase. Tell me what's going on here. We're going to have some video playing.
Well, we're going on we have to take a long flight. It's like an 8-hour flight. And so, I'm a little concerned about her, even though,
You've done that before, right? I mean, with her, what's the longest flight she's been on?
She's gone, I think the longest flight she's been on has been to California.
Okay.
Which
so
is like
5 hours.
6 hours. And she's been perfect. But, this is, and if there's delays, it could be a 10-hour flight, and then you got to get to the airport. So it's a long flight. So I bought her some diapers. I thought, let me buy her. So I bought the cutest little extra small pink diapers for ChaCha, and I put them on her, trying to train her to use these diapers, and she refuses to. She's like, Mom, really?
I respect that, ChaCha. I agree with her.
She looked at, you could literally see the face of humiliation and indignation. Mm-hmm. I think she could have sued me. She would have sued me.
Yeah.
So
she's got pride. She's
yeah. So I think the Pampers are not going to work. If anybody has any tips with how to travel for long distances with little dogs, send them my way. I've now bought her these little green wee pads. Because, most of them are white.
Right.
And she refuses to pee on a white wee pad.
Really?
So I'm hoping, she likes grass. She's a Florida dog.
I understand.
She's a Florida dog. So I'm hoping these things, like I'm going to take some of these wee pads and I'm going to rub them on the grass.
You need some artificial turf, like a square of
I
artificial turf.
have some of that too,
Yeah,
but I can't bring that out on the plane.
I guess not.
Because then what do I do with?
Right. All right. So going tomorrow, we have an all-new show. It's Anthony Ramos and Molly Jong Fast for her book, which is great.
Ramos.
I'm excited about Anthony Ramos too. And we're going on a 4th of July break next week for Behind the Table. We'll be back with new episodes starting Monday, July 7th. Have a happy 4th of July, and then we'll see you when we return.
Did you hear this?
Yeah.
Did you hear this? She's got a 4th of July.
Oh, look at that.
She's
a patriot.
She is a patriot.
Thank you, ChaCha. Thanks, everybody.
Behind the Table is executive produced by Brian Teta. Supervising producers are Summer Shake and Nathan Getty, with production assistant Emily Darcy and editor Brian Davis. Special thanks to Laurie Hogan, Molly Kaiser, and Katerina Alexopoulos. Producers for ABC Audio are Trevor Hastings, Camille Peterson, and Amira Williams. With supervising producer Susie Liu, executive producer of podcast programming Laura Mayer, and vice president Liz Alessi.